garden is sleeping. Hey homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen. Today we are making Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire sauce. You know, that's one of those things that people always trip up on the pronunciation of. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to call it Worcestershire sauce. And honestly, this is definitely just a fun project because you can. I don't know how long I've had this bottle. It's almost out. Best by February 28th, 2019. It is currently December 2023. So this is 4 years old, and it was probably a year before that, before the best by date. So probably 5 years old. It takes me a very long time to go through a lot of Worcestershire sauce. I use it occasionally in things like beef stews. It's a nice dose of umami, but it's not something that's kind of a go-to condiment for me. Unlike Becky at Acre Homestead, who uses it like water. Like, I'm always shocked at watching her videos at how much of this she uses, which has inspired me. Maybe I need to be using more of it. So I thought it would be fun to make my own. And this recipe is coming from this canning book. And I've had this for a little over a year, and this was one of the recipes I flagged just because why not? How fun is it to actually try out something like that and make it from scratch? My husband was looking at me a little askance the other day, and he was like, why are you making Worcestershire sauce? And I said, because I can, and because it has a ton of ingredients, and I love recipes like that. And I had everything on hand that I needed to make this in my house. I'm a foodie. I like to cook from a bunch of different ethnic cuisines, and I literally had everything I needed for this in my house already. So why not? It should be a lot of fun. So we're gonna start out with raisins. The raisins get soaked in some water to reconstitute them, and then the water gets drained off. Other ingredients include tamarind paste, and this is typically used in Thai cooking. If you've ever made pad Thai from scratch, this is where this will often come up. Tamarind is kind of an interesting, a little bit sharp, a little bit fruity and raisiny, so kind of in that same ballpark. We're gonna need some just plain white vinegar, and then other ingredients include onions, a little bit of anchovy. It calls for anchovy paste. I'm going to use anchovy fillets because that's what I have. Red pepper flakes, black peppercorn, fresh ginger, and then other spices include cardamom, cloves, garlic powder along with fresh garlic, so both, which is interesting, a little bit of ground cinnamon, and some ground mustard. So part of what makes Worcestershire sauce such a great flavor enhancer and kind of umami bomb is, one, the fish. Worcestershire sauce does have fish in it, which a lot of people don't realize. And then just all those glutamates from all of those different ingredients. Glutamates is a fancy, more foodie way of saying MSG. So monosodium glutamate. Monosodium glutamate, you can buy it in containers. If you've ever seen Accent in a jar, that's monosodium glutamate, but it actually occurs naturally in tons of different fermented things. And so like tomato paste has a lot of glutamates in it, soy sauce has a lot of glutamates in it. And that's part of what Worcestershire sauce is basically just that really unctuous umami flavor that makes everything just sing. So it kind of lifts everything else up. So we're gonna try making our own homemade Worcestershire sauce just because we can. Let's get started. Okay, so this is a 1/4 cup raisins with a 1/4 cup of boiling water that has been soaking for 15 minutes. We are going to drain off the liquid, which we do not need. And then to this, we are going to add 1/2 cup of unsulphured molasses. I forgot to mention this in the intro. And I'm gonna microwave this for about 30 seconds just to loosen it up a little bit. And this is the tamarind paste. And it's been sitting for a long time, so I'm just gonna make sure it's well mixed before we use that. We're gonna need a 1/4 cup of that. It looks a lot like molasses. And I used to live in a part of the world in southern Arizona where tamarind actually grew. There were tamarind trees. So tasting that, it's a little bit salty. It's definitely acidic. It's actually quite good. Very fruity. Huh, interesting. Tamarind is actually also used as a beverage in a lot of Mexican cuisine. So you'll go into those little Mexican taquerias and they'll have the machine on the counter that's doing the circulation thing. And usually it's horchata, jicama, and tamarind. And so the tamarind is the brown one. The jicama is basically hibiscus tea. And then the horchata is rice. And I don't know about you guys, but back in the day in my 20s when I used to see that, they all used to freak me out because I didn't know what it was. And there was no way I was going to try it because it was something I had never had before and I was afraid of it. And I missed out on a lot of really great teas because of that. But I've never actually had the tamarind one. So now I'm interested to try it. Okay, so we have a half a cup of unsulphured molasses. And normally I would have greased this because it makes the molasses come out a lot easier, but I was a little concerned about introducing oil into this because I don't think it has any oil and I didn't want to add that to it. So I'm just going to use my very clean finger. All right, I need a 1/4 cup tamarind paste. I'm excited about this. This is going to be fun. I also need a 10-ounce onion. And this is just going to get blended, so I'm just going to chunk this up and get the skin off of it. And this is from my beautiful homegrown onions from this year. And you could do this in the food processor as well as the blender. I just happen to be using the blender because I sometimes think it does a better job of things like this where you're really trying to break things down really finely. And for things that are more liquid, I like it better than a food processor, which tends to slosh everything all over the place. But you can use one or the other and it wouldn't be a big deal. All right, let's see. Raisin, molasses, next 4 ingredients. So that would be tamarind, onion. I need a piece of ginger and a clove of garlic. I actually hate it when recipes list things that way. I would much prefer they actually name in the description the stuff instead of saying the next 4. It's too easy to accidentally mess that up. And I just need a 1/2 inch. And again, I've said this before in other videos, but I hate ginger measurements where they just say a 1/2 inch or an inch, because are we talking about this part of an inch or are we talking about this part of an inch? Those are vastly different quantities. And it makes me nuts when they don't either call out like a tablespoon, diced or crushed or whatever, or they tell you the diameter of the piece that they're talking about. But I happen to really love ginger, and so I'm not worried about overdoing it. And I could probably leave the skin on this. This is pretty fresh and it's tender, but I'm kind of old school about it. I think about where this has been. Ginger is a tropical plant, so it was probably grown overseas, or at least in Florida. It's traveled a long way. A lot of hands have probably touched this. So I just like to peel it. All right, I'm just gonna put all of that in there. All right, we're gonna blend this up. All right, that worked pretty good. So this is gonna get cooked, simmered, and the rest of the ingredients are gonna get added. And you really smell the molasses in that. We need 2 cardamom pods, just the seeds, the outside removed. I am a chai tea drinker and I make my own chai concentrate. And so I always have cardamom on hand because it is one of the primary ingredients in chai. This counter is clean. I just washed it off before I started videotaping. Fresh cardamom smells amazing. If you've never seen cardamom pods, and then this is what the seed looks like. And then if you were to grind that, you would have cardamom powder, which I often make. It's very strong. 2 tablespoons salt, quite a bit. And I am using pickling salt. I'm sure you could use Redmond's or sea salt. Next, 8 ingredients. So all the rest of the ingredients are going in here. 2 tablespoons dark brown sugar. 1, 2. Interesting that they're using brown sugar considering how much molasses is already in here. probably not really all that necessary to use brown sugar. I'm sure you could use white sugar. 1 tablespoon crushed red pepper flakes, 1 tablespoon dry mustard. These are my own chilies, and they're a random cross of a couple of different things. They're not crazy hot. And when I do mustard, I just grind my own. So this is whole mustard seed that's been ground. I think when you buy powdered mustard seed at the store, it doesn't have some of the chaff. It's a little bit finer, but this works just fine. Teaspoon garlic powder, and this is my own garlic powder. If you guys would like a video on how to make your own garlic powder, it's really quite easy. Just let me know. It does help if you have a dehydrator. But I can't remember the last time I bought garlic powder at the store. 1 teaspoon whole cloves, not ground. And cloves are very strong. 1 teaspoon black peppercorn. 1 teaspoon anchovy paste. And this is gonna get filtered later, so I'm not overly worried about this. This is just in olive oil, which is why it looks the way it does. And these are little anchovy fillets that are just kind of coiled around in this jar. Don't be afraid of anchovies, you guys. I know it's one of those things that I didn't eat for years just because I heard so many other people get grossed out by them and say, I don't want it on pizza, which is my total exposure to anchovies. And the reality is, again, lots of glutamates, and they're not meant to be eaten, just out of the jar fresh. They are meant to be used for flavoring and things. There we go, that's probably about a teaspoon. Get that rinsed off so that our measuring spoon doesn't taste like fish. And a half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Cinnamon is an interesting thing. I hear people on occasion on food groups talk about how stuff in the store is not real cinnamon, which is true. It's a different species. It's cassia. And that, they say it like you're being fooled and poisoned. And the reality is we all grew up eating the cassia type cinnamon, and that true cinnamon has a very different flavor profile, and it's not as spicy, and it's generally not what we're looking for. And so after doing a bunch of my own research into that, I realized that no, I do want the cassia cinnamon because that's the flavor that I grew up with. That's the flavor that I put on, cinnamon sugar toast. It's the flavor that I associate with cinnamon, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like somebody lied to you and they're trying to pull a fast one. It's just a different species of plant, and it's the bark that gets used. And if you want that different flavor profile from true cinnamon, fantastic, go for it. But don't act like cassia is some terrible, way inadequate substitute, because it is not. All right, I'm just gonna get everything stirred in here. And I will look up and put on the screen. I think it's proprietary, and so they don't know exactly what goes into actual Worcestershire sauce from England, but it is a bunch of different things. And so this kind of random mix of stuff is not far off in terms of it being a lot of ingredients. This was pretty inexpensive to put together, and if I hate it, I can adjust accordingly to the next time around. I think I forgot the vinegar. I'm missing vinegar. This is 2 cups of vinegar divided. Oh, with 1 cup vinegar. I should have blended a cup of vinegar in the food processor. So I'm missing a cup of vinegar in this mix. My bad. All right, so here's a cup. Okay, now let's bring this to a simmer. Figuring it out as we go, guys. So 2nd cup goes in here. Oh yeah, now we're getting to a big recipe. I'm curious. Interestingly, how much you taste the garlic. That was just 1 clove of garlic. It's probably garlic and onion that I'm really getting. Different finger. That's delightful. So we just bring this to a boil, remove from heat, let cool. So that's what's happening. I'll bring you back in a few minutes when this is fully boiling. Bring to a boil, stirring constantly. Yeah, I didn't do that, but I never do that. I'm gonna turn the heat up a little bit and get this to a more rolling boil. There's a lot of liquid in here. I don't really think you need to stir constantly. Usually when the instructions indicate that, it's because they are afraid it's gonna burn. I had it on my lowest heat setting, so that I could get my kitchen cleaned up and do some other things. I'm looking as if when I'm making jam, where it doesn't stop boiling when I'm stirring it. That's what I consider a boil, and we are definitely right there. You can see the bubbles continue even though I'm stirring. So I'm going to turn this off, put the lid on, and we will let that cool, and then we'll strain it. All right, it's a couple of hours later, and our sauce has cooled off to room temperature. And I misread the directions. Everything actually goes into this initially without filtering, and then it sits for a while, and then it gets filtered. And this says quart jar. I'm a little worried that this is not all gonna fit in a quart jar. And so I'm gonna use a half-gallon jar just because I have some. And that way I don't have to split the recipe. If it comes down to it, we'll see how much we end up with here. Oh, I do have exactly 4 cups. So this would have fit in a quart jar, just right to the top. I don't mind having it in a half-gallon instead. All right, we're gonna cap this. This is not airtight, but it'll keep dust and things out. And then it says, store in a dark, cool place, 65 to 75 degrees for 2 to 4 weeks, depending on desired strength. So I'm gonna put the date on top of this. And I'm just gonna stash this in my pantry, and we'll come back to it after the new year and see how it is. So here we are a month later, and I'm straining out this sauce just for fun. Smell this.
Whoa.
Right? And because there's a lot of pulp in there from all of the fruit and the onions, it takes a little while to strain this. This definitely was a slow process. I won't make you watch the whole thing. But I wanted it to be a nice thin sauce and not have a lot of chunky bits in it. So we went through the process of straining this a little bit at a time. I could have used cheesecloth here. I don't love using cheesecloth because I end up just throwing it out because I hate washing it when it's full of all kinds of stuff and it never feels like it ever really gets clean, and it doesn't do well in the washing machine. So here I'm doing a taste test. This is actual Lea and Perrins. Of course, this is like 5-year-old actual Lea and Perrins, so probably not the best sample. But I'm tasting that, and then I'm tasting the new Worcestershire sauce that's homemade. And they're vastly different. They look somewhat similar. You can do a comparison side by side here, but really, really different flavor. And then I took it over and had my husband taste it as well. And the big things that stand out is the Lea and Perrins is salty and definitely has a fish note that you get. And the newer stuff, it's smoother, it's sweeter, it's definitely sweeter, quite a bit sweeter. And you get some of the spices that are in there. His comment was the homemade stuff is vastly better. It reminds me of a chutney. It definitely has a bit of a chutney flavor. And so we just decanted this into a nice quart-sized jar. I'm gonna try to make more of an effort to actually use this more than I do the regular Lea and Perrins, and that's it. We now have homemade Worcestershire that will probably last me at least 5 years. But this was a really fun project, you guys, and worth doing, and not real expensive in terms of the ingredients that are involved. Yeah, give this recipe a try. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, or share. I have new content coming out every week.